Hi everyone and welcome to the Ferret and Gibbon podcast. Hi all. I've realised that I practically never introduced myself at the beginning of these episodes. So hi, my name's Claire. I go by the name of Merialc, that's Merialc, or Ferret and Gibbon in various different parts of the internet. So I think I'm Merialc on Ravelry and Twitter. I'm Ferret and Gibbon here and on Instagram. Kind of the way the world works. Yeah, that's me. I have a few finished objects to share with you this week. And there is still daylight at the moment, we're just on the cusp of daylight. I've just finished work, and as soon as I close the computer down, I'm going to grab the camera while there's still even a vague hint of daylight in the sky. But yes, so some finished objects. So the first one I have to show you is this beautiful Ponderosa hat by Woolly Wormhead. This, and with a beautiful fluffy pom-pom, because why not? This I'm really pleased with. Again, a couple of firsts for me on this hat. If I just give you a bit of modelling. Hat. It is beautifully warm. So this had an alternating cable cast on at the bottom, which I've never done before and took me for ages to do. But it has given it a lovely bit of stretch, which is fantastic. But I'm fairly certain I lost count numerous times while I was going around as to what I had knit and what I had purled and what the hell was going on. So it's not perfect, but it looks really good. And then it had it's like a weird cast off and cast back on again thing that I've not done before. I think it looks really good, but it was very new to me, so it's all learning, and learning is good, right? But yeah, I'm really pleased with it. You can hopefully see that it's got these lovely little mini clustery patterns on it all the way up. And if I take the pom-pom off, you can see my horrible attempt at sewing the top of the pom-pom bit on. Really nice decreases at the top as well. So it doesn't need a pom-pom, but I mean, there's nothing to do with need with a pom-pom, is there? I just like pom-poms. And yes, I've got these detachable pom-poms from Cowling Country Crafts. I think that's right. Which I think are very cute, and I think that works really well with this. The yarn that this is made from is a bit of a treat. This was an unbound fundraiser for a book that I supported a couple of years ago. It's a book by Natalie Fergie called The Sewing Machine, and as part of trying to raise the money for the book, she was giving away various prizes at various different stages. And she is an indie dyer as well as an author, so yarn, yay. And all the different, I managed to put the hat into some butter, I think. I don't even know. There's no butter. Let's just wipe it off and pretend that never happened. So all the colourways of the yarns that she gave away as part of the fundraiser were named after various different bits that happen within the book. So this colourway was called Tie for a Wedding. And it's just lovely and warm. And because I got two skeins of it as part of the funding, I've got the hat, and I've also got matching arm warmers. Now, you might remember I said last week I made some arm warmers which were beautiful but weren't quite snug enough for me, but they were fingering weight yarn warmers, so I should really probably have expected that. These ones, however, are in this lovely DK weight, and if I them on. Wonderful cabled pattern on the front, plain on the back, but they've also got, which I really like, nice long ends to keep your fingers warm while you're walking around, but that can be then folded back when you actually need to have use of your fingers and be able to do something. So really pleased with these. So these are called the Weekend Walking Mitts, and these are by Diana Waller. And they were really nice. Actually, I really enjoyed the cabling. I definitely went wrong. I think I missed a cable out somewhere around there, but don't look too closely. No one will ever notice. But this is lovely little combination set, works really well. The fundraiser, as I said, was for a book called The Sewing Machine, and I would highly recommend it to crafty and non-crafty types alike. It's a really sweet story that looks at well, it follows the story of a sewing machine, but it looks at various different families and some secrets within the families, and goes back to the sewing machine factories and when the sewing machine, and I'm really not explaining this very well, but it is really well written. It's just been re-released with a new cover, so I'll see if I can pop that up here. And I definitely recommend that you read it. It was a delightful read. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, that's 2 finished projects. 3, these count as separate ones. No, 2 finished projects, which I'm really pleased with and have been wearing constantly since I finished them. I've then got some works in progress. So I've shown you this one before. So this is my Stripe Study Shawl by Veera Välimäki. Välimäki? I hope. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And this is, so I think when we last saw it, it was down here somewhere. The cable's not long enough, so I can't actually show you properly at the moment. But what's happened is, so I'm using the Blackberry Picking mini skein that I got from Fibre Fox for all the colour stripes. And they're 20-gram skeins, each of the little ones. But as I'm getting further along into the shawl, I'm needing more than 20 grams for each of the stripes. So what I'm doing is gradually growing out the grey that I was having as just like the little contrast line in between. That as I'm repeating the colours, and as the colours are getting bigger, I'm now growing out the grey and making the colours come smaller. I'm not sure what it's going to look like when it's finished. And as I said, it's too big and the cable isn't big enough for me to actually open it up and see what it looks like. So I'm just going to keep my fingers crossed. But it's a really enjoyable knit. It's a very simple and repetitive, and especially when you're at the beginning of a new colour section, because you're working short rows, it feels like you're making progress very quickly, rather than having to constantly go across all of the long rows. I mean, you have some of those, but not that many, so that makes it feel like you're making a lot more progress. So I think I'm going to add in the original pattern. I think called for about 12 stripes, and I'm currently on 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 stripes, but it doesn't feel massive to me yet, and I have still got a few odds and sods of the mini skein set to use up, and I have still got enough greys, so I'm just going to keep going for a little while and see how far I get with it. And if it's massive at the end, it's massive at the end. I mean, can a shawl be too big? I'm not convinced a shawl can be too big. I think I showed this last time, but this project is living in my bag, which is a Natalie Bain fine art print bag with a bee on it. Bees, I love bees. Big fan of the bees. The other project on the go now. So this has been an ongoing conversation and an ongoing discussion. I have cast on. I've cast on a garment. Yay! I think last time we spoke, I had decided which one I was probably going to cast on, but I don't think I had cast it on yet. But I now have. Oh no, I definitely had the yarn because I remember showing you the bag. it might have had a couple of rows on it, but it's now sort of taking shape. So this is the Crumb cardigan, the Crumb cardigan by Andi Satturlund. And so far you can see I've got armholes, I've got a back. It's growing. It's only going to be a little cardigan, so I can't actually have a huge amount more to do. It's fairly plain knitting most of the way around, but it has got sort of a lovely little lacy border going around it, which is going to need some pretty heavy blocking, I think, to stop it from curling up on itself. But I have done, I'm quite pleased with it so far, how it sort of had to join bits together and make bits work. It's coming together, I think. I know I should have been doing this the whole way through, but I've just started alternating skeins here, because up until now I had this front bit as one on its knitting that, and then knitting that bit, and then it's only just got to the stage where I think it will really notice if there's a difference between the skeins. So I've just started to bring in two, which is the first time I've done alternating skeins to avoid colour weirdness. We'll see if I make sure I can't go wrong, can I? It'll be fine. But yeah, so I promised that I would cast on a jumper by spring. It is not yet spring, and I've cast it on, so you never know, I might actually cast on a proper jumper by spring, a sweater. But the cardigan is going well, and I'm really pleased with its progress, and yeah. And that's living in my cheaper bag that Neil got me for Christmas. Quick hiatus there, because my boss called me, and there's some phone calls you can't say no to, especially when you're using a phone to film your podcast. Anyway, there's only actually one other project bit that I wanted to show you this week. And this is for a little bit of stash acquisition of beautifulness. So I have just bought, in the Boxing Day sale, I can't remember if I showed you these or not, but in the Boxing Day sales I bought some chromatic yarns. So that's by the Corner of Craft, chromatic yarns. Oh, look at these colours, aren't they stunning? This is a Sturdy DK in the Dagon colourway. It's a bit, coming up a bit blue on the screen. It's a bit greener in real life. I'm not sure moving it further away is helping at all, but yeah, that kind of colour, like that. So these were lovely, and it was on sale, so I bought two, and I didn't actually know what I was going to do with it. But then, so I was doing some stash organising over the holidays, which involved going through a bunch of whips that were never going to get finished, and frogging them all to bring back beautiful yarn into my stash that I could do fun things with. And as part of doing that, I found this again, which I bought years ago. It was one of the first, probably one of the first. If people could stop calling me while I'm trying to video, that would be great. Especially when they then just hang up and don't talk to me. That's not on. Anyway, so this was one of the first posher yarns that I think I bought. Probably one of the first times I moved on from using acrylic. This is a Manos del Uruguay silk blend. And is it the Aries colourway? I've got the name of the colourway here somewhere. Libra. It's the Libra colourway. 7032, the Libra colourway. And I just came across it, and I just remembered this little bit that's left over. I've used it in a couple of different little projects. I made a cowl out of it, I think, and maybe a little hat. But I had this little bit left over and I just found it again. And I've got this square that I've knitted up at some point to do something with. I've got no idea what I was intending to do with that. But I just remembered how lovely this yarn feels. So I thought, oh, or maybe I can see if I can find it on eBay or something like that, another little skein of this colourway. I could make it into something nice. And I did find some in this colourway, but I didn't buy that just yet because it was the ball prices. Basically, when I got this, it was a 100-gram ball, and it was expensive. It didn't feel extortionate. Whereas now they've changed them to 50-gram balls, and it just felt a little bit more pricey for something that I didn't actually know what I wanted to do with it. But while I was on the website looking for that colourway, I found these colours on sale. It's the same, it's my Satturlund, it's the silk blend, and they were reduced. I had like over a third off. And it is one of those yarns that I just want to stroke. And there wasn't much left. So 2 balls of the cream, 2 balls of the black. And I just had in my mind, oh, I could do something quite striking and bold with like a black and cream shawl. And then I thought, black and cream shawl with a hint of green. That could be quite funky. So that's the plan. I keep changing my mind as to which pattern I'm going to knit with them, but this will be my next cast on. I was going to be using up stash this year. In fact, I really am going to use up stash, but Leslie over at the Not Quite Enough Yarn podcast has started a knit along this year, which is a stash busting knit along. I think it's Stash Cal 2019 is the hashtag. Yeah, that sounds about right. And I am going to make use of all that lovely yarn that I frogged to be able to reknit. In fact, I've got some wonderful stuff that I've already got. I think I've got enough to make another cardigan, sort of a longer cardigan. I've got some more that I can definitely make into a shawl. I have realised I have got balls and balls and balls of Cascade 220. I am going to finish off the blankets that I was making with those. I have got, basically I've got tons of stuff and tons of projects that need finishing. I've got yarn that I've always got, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to do with it, and I have not cast it on and I've not done it, and I'm going to do that this year. But after I've made this, because pretty. Also, I can't afford to buy any more yarn, so I definitely need to start delving into the stash. But there's a lot of stash to delve into, and it will be like shopping because there's so much of it, but we will enjoy it. Leslie over at Not Quite Enough Yarn is also trying to convince me to design my own shawl to use these 3 beautiful colours with. She's offering to lend me sticks directories and everything, and I'm like, I don't think I'm quite at the designing my own stuff yet. Let's get through this year. Let's make some more garments. Let's make some more things. Let's actually keep the knitting momentum going throughout 2019. Then 2020, maybe we'll design something. Unless inspiration strikes before then, but we'll see. For the moment, I don't have a project bag for these because they're not a project yet, but I have recently invested in some plastic Ziploc thingies, which I think are designed for storing cashmere jumpers or something like that, but I got a little bit moth phobic recently, so I've bought a load of these and I'm gradually moving stash over into these little zip pouches so that partly so I can keep equivalent stuff together, so I can have fingering weight in one and make it easier to find them in my bottomless pit of knitting yarn, but also just, yeah, let's try and keep moths at bay. I saw one in the kitchen the other day and it freaked me out a bit. Just the one, but. So anyway, that's my knitting and making and acquisitioning this week. That's short and sweet, I think. I'm really pleased that I've managed to get some multiple pieces done, but obviously I'm back at work now. My little manic foray over Christmas of knitting has to die down a little bit. Back to knitting just on the train mostly is when I'm commuting, and in the evenings a little bit when I get the chance. But the weeks of endless knitting have now finished. It's just a shame. I really did enjoy that, and I might take a day off at some point soon just to sit and knit. Although I am going to spend most of this Saturday, on various forms of public transport with a whistle-stop trip down to Bristol to go to the theatre. So I'll be able to hopefully get some good knitting time in on the various trains and coaches and things that I need to do to make that happen in one day. It would be weird to have a podcast at the moment and not talk about this issue. So I did want to talk about the issue of diversity in the knitting and crafting community. I am not an expert on this subject. I have been doing a lot of listening and a lot of I've been really don't know how to say this. This is something that I've been aware of to an extent for a little while, but not realised the full extent of the problem. So a little while ago, I started trying to diversify my social media feeds. I've started trying to engage more with a wider pool and group of people. But I was coming at it very much from a me perspective, and in terms of I'm missing out because I'm not seeing all the stuff that there is out there. What I wasn't doing was thinking about what that lack of representation meant for everybody else, and what that meant for how other people were feeling within the community. And I'm sorry, I should have done better, and I'm really sorry that I didn't. I will try harder. I promise I will try harder. I can't guarantee that I'll always get things right, but I will always try my hardest, and if I do something wrong, I will own up to it. And if you would like to call me out on something that I've done, then please tell me, and I promise not to respond immediately, because sometimes responding to things like that takes time to process it so that you don't come back with something really shitty in response. But I will take feedback on board. I will try and do more work on my own to think about how the world fucks people over in various different ways, shapes and forms. I'm aware of some of the ways in which the world does fuck people over from my own personal experiences, but I really hadn't thought enough about the issue of people of colour within the crafting community, or within the world generally. It's not just within the crafting community. I think one of the things, especially when you are, the conversation of privilege is obviously a really difficult one to think of when you don't. This is going to require some editing while I try and get my thoughts in order so that you don't just have minutes and minutes and minutes of me going, yeah, this is complicated. This is complicated, but in some ways it's really complicated, in some ways it's really simple. The really simple bit is Black people and other people of colour have been shat on by the world, by the white world, for fucking ages. And as a white person, I benefit from systems which oppress others. And that's not to say that I have deliberately shat on anyone myself, but I haven't sufficiently deliberately not shat on people, and I haven't sufficiently deliberately prevented other people from being shat on. That's probably the weirdest analogy of this that you've heard so far, isn't it? But I know what I mean. I'm struggling to say it. Basically, I've not done enough. Collectively, white people have not done enough. We need to do better. I will try to do better. If I hope that other people will try to do better with me. And yeah. I hope the next time I have a political rant of some description on this podcast that I can express the words better. Maybe next week we'll do Brexit. That could be fun. But I think the really important thing is that obviously this issue has come up in the crafting community at the moment, but it is obviously not exclusive to the crafting community. So while you are in perhaps off the back of this conversation started engaging more with people of colour in your crafting networks, have a think about what you can do in your work networks or your community networks as well. Don't think that just by following more people of colour within the crafting community you'll tick your box and you're absolved of all responsibility. This is a bigger issue than that. And no one says it's going to be easy, but that's our fault. Collectively, not individually, but collectively it is our fault. Although sometimes individually, depending on who we are. But yeah, let's do better. Let's do better. Last week I left you with a poem at the end by my friend Rachel, which I hope you all enjoyed, her performance poetry. This week I'm not going to include it within the video itself because it's not mine to share, but I will include a link on the end credits to a video by another local knitter, Lorna Hamilton. You might have seen her out and about. She's been a big advocate for black people within the knitting community for a long time now. She is based down in my neck of the woods, and I actually became aware of her before I became aware of her, if that makes sense. Or I became aware of her work before I became aware of her. She is very outspoken in her knitting and uses her knitting as a way of discussing things. So I think the first time I became aware of her work was I was walking down the high street and I saw hanging over a fence there was a big machine knit piece talking about domestic violence. This was around about the time that domestic violence was a big storyline in the Archers. I don't follow the Archers, so I don't know the details of it, but that's when it was, and there was a big knitted piece. And I remember looking at that at the time and being really interested in it. I later found out that was Lorna, that Lorna lives locally, and I've seen various other things that she's done since. And so I'm going to include links to 2 videos of hers at the end. One is called Knitting Ain't Whack, and the other is called... It's Lorna Hamilton Brown. Apologies, Lorna, for getting your name wrong. But yeah, so the first video that I'm going to share a link to is called Knitting Ain't Whack, where Lorna HB is the knitting MC. You might actually have seen Lorna before. She was on, if you watched there was a craft programme on BBC4 a little while ago, if you watched BBC. She was on the show where they were doing letterpress and they were learning how to do letterpress. That's Lorna. So yeah, so there's a lovely little video called Knitting Ain't Whack that's been filmed, that she filmed around here, about getting people knitting. And the other piece that she's done is called Knitting the Blues, and it's talking about the therapeutic effects of knitting. And again, a lot of that has been knit around in my part of the world. So I will include links to both of those videos at the end, and I'd strongly encourage you to go and watch them. But that's all for me, short and sweet this week. I will probably be back in a couple of weeks' time, as and when I can. The light has now started to go. The sun's definitely gone down now. Maybe at some point I'll actually get a chance to do this in proper daylight, and then I'll give you a view of the... show you the sea outside. The view of the sea outside my window. Words fail me so badly at the moment. Who knows? Anyway, that's all for today. If you have any questions, then please leave them in the comments below. If you would like to find out about anything that I'm doing, leave questions in the comments below. If you think I've made a gigantic fool of myself, yeah, don't worry about telling me that. You can, yeah, I know that I've made a fool of myself in various different ways, but that's okay. But thank you for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye. Bye.